This is the Hacking Real Estate Podcast, Episode 10.
I would only work with a wholesaler if you're able to secure funding that's like cash. So whether it's cash or a home equity line of credit or a self-directed IRA, or you can borrow private money or something along those lines. In those instances where you can perform like cash, I think it makes sense. You can get hard money loans too, but hard money loans are really expensive, right? In many parts of the country, it's 2 points, a loan origination, and 12% interest rate. So we don't generally recommend that unless you're going to be a really, really fast operator, so that you can minimize the interest cost. So if you can perform like a cash buyer, I think in those instances, it does make sense to work with a wholesaler, because for you to buy from a wholesaler, you need to act like cash. You're not going to get a mortgage. You're not going to go to Bank of America and get a 30-day loan. You have to be a cash buyer. And the reason why that is, if you look at all these bandit signs, right, it says we buy houses cash. This is the promise we make to the homeowner, right? They're going to get a cash offer. So if you want to work with a wholesaler, you can't try to get a loan. You've got to behave like a cash buyer.
Welcome to the Hacking Real Estate Podcast, where we dive into the stories of seasoned, hands-on, and tech-savvy real estate investors. We'll learn the strategies and tools they use to maximize returns and minimize hassle, all while navigating the rapidly changing real estate market. I'm your co-host, Brandon Hall, and managing partner of Hall CPA, and I'm sitting alongside my co-host, Vikas Gupta, CEO of Azebo. With our combined 15 years of experience in real estate investing and entrepreneurship, we're here to help you up your real estate game. Let's get hacking. All right. Our guest today is Steve Trang. He's the founder of Real Estate Disruptors. He started his podcast in 2018 to inspire wholesalers and real estate agents to double their incomes by adding a second leg to their businesses. Steve's goal is to generate 100 millionaires through teaching other investors about real estate. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. Your audience, tech guys, well, I'd love to talk to you because that was my background.
Right. You were an engineer, right?
I was an engineer, yes.
All right. Well, we'll get into that. My big question right now is, how many millionaires have you created?
Verified, 15.
15. Okay.
You know, we have people that send us messages on Instagram, Facebook, and so on. Like, hey, because of you, I become a millionaire. And it's great. But I'm the kind of person that always likes to verify. There are a lot of people, entrepreneurs, real estate agents, investors, so on. Sometimes they like to go a little over top. And so I'm the person that's always like to validate things. And so we have 15 people that have been able to share, whether from their accountant, bank accounts, tax returns, whatever, that they're actually millionaires. And the reason why I verify, and that might sound crazy, the reason why we verify is we actually send you a plaque, right? And we commemorate it, and we do videos and content around it.
Ah, cool.
At no charge, right? We want to celebrate this because we want to genuinely make a lasting impact in the real estate community.
That's amazing. So you kind of gamify the 100 millionaire. What are you going to do when you get to 100 millionaires?
We probably open up to 1,000. I mean, like every entrepreneur, we get milestones. Like, hey, once I do this, I'd be happy. No, once I do this, we just kind of move the milestone, move the goalpost.
That's great. All right. Well, I know that you got into real estate in 2007. You were an engineer before that. So let's go all the way back to 2007. What was your life like? What were you doing? What made you want to get into real estate?
I appreciate you asking this question. So I did the thing that mom and dad wanted us to do, right? Get good grades so you can go to a good college, so you can get a good job. Graduated Arizona State University. I mean, good college is subjective, right? But, I got a full ride to ASU. I graduated in 2002, right after the whole dot-com bust. There weren't a lot of engineering companies hiring, and with a degree in electrical engineering, if you don't have a master's, you actually can't even do any design work. You're kind of relegated to a tester. So I went to graduate school, and I went to UC San Diego. I had a whole bunch of different options, but I went to UC San Diego for two reasons. A, they were willing to cover my tuition, and B, it's San Diego, right? Like, how cool is that? So I went to UC San Diego as a PhD candidate, left after a year and a half with a master's degree because I realized the amount of work required for a PhD was not the kind of work I wanted to do. And so I went to go work at Intel for a few years. And man, I'm sure for the people that are listening, the stuff that's interesting in college and grad school, like reading the papers, like publications on the future of engineering, you're reading, you got to remember, this is 2002, 2003, right? Reading about the future of OLEDs and like having like foldable displays. And like I get to work on this stuff. It's amazing. And then you get to a real world and you work for a corporation and none of that. You don't get to do any of that stuff. You don't get to do any of the cool stuff, right? Like once you work at an engineering company, you're just a cog. And so for myself, I literally got to do nothing innovative, you know. All I got to do was like tweak previous designs. So when I first started, we were working in 45 nanometer technology. I'm sorry, 65 nanometer technology. Then we moved to 45. And while I was there, we got down to 35 nanometer technology, which is great. All I did was just take a previous design and just update it from 3 volts to the 1.8 volts. And, you know, working on USB 3.0, again, this back in 2006 and 2007, you're working on USB 3.0, but this is not what you got your degree for, right? You got your master's degree so you can work on cool, innovative stuff. And I actually made a complaint about this, right? They had to sit me down in management. And they basically said, Steve, we're not going to let you do this. And here's why. If we let you go do these things and it doesn't work, it will cost Intel billions of dollars, right? Like they can't just have this new graduate out of college doing the fun, cool stuff. They got to have their 20-year PhD guys doing it, which makes a lot of sense. It makes complete sense. But that's not what I went to school for. I didn't go to school to learn cool stuff and then wait 20 years.
I'm just going to jump in right here because this is probably across all industries because I had the same experience in accounting. I graduated with an accounting and a finance degree. And went up to work at PwC, Big Four accounting firm. I think they were number 1 in the world at the time. They always flip-flop back and forth with Deloitte. And I joined their consulting practice, right? And so the pitch was, you're going to work with all these great business owners. It's glam, you know, it's going to be amazing. And then you get into the actual practice and you're a spreadsheet monkey. You're doing but the problem is you're not even doing like fun spreadsheet stuff. You're just doing the same like one process of the spreadsheet every day. And I had a very similar conversation. I was like, dude, there's gotta be more to like being a consultant than this. And the manager sat me down and like, you have to do this because this is what we're billing you for. And if you don't do it this way, then we're not gonna be able to bill you with this. I was just like, yeah, but this is not what I wanted to do.
Right? The monotony, the mundane, it's important, it's critical, it's just not for me.
So you're sitting there, you're doing the monotony, and then what? You recognize that real estate might be an option. How did you make that connection?
So I know when I started Intel, you learn there's a few different things, right? You learn that after 7 years you get a sabbatical. You learn after 7 years all your stock options vest. So like from day one, I was like, okay, 7 years. I'm gonna be at Intel for 7 years, get my stocks to vest, do the sabbatical thing. Hopefully by then, get married, have a wife that's got insurance benefits, and I'm going to be an independent contractor. I'm just going to do the cool stuff. I'm not going to stick around and do the mundane thing. That was the plan. And then somewhere along the way, I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? 3.5 years into my 7-year plan. And after reading the book, it's like, wait a minute. There's a way that you can make money that is passive and exceeds what you can make active. Well, let's do that thing. And so then I started buying rental properties with my best friends. You know, the 4 of us got together. We made an LLC. We started buying rental properties. This is 2006-ish, 2007, right before, you know, that whole market correction. And so while I'm reading this book and learning these things, trying to acquire properties, and meeting the real estate broker, I was like, what do you do? He's like, yeah, I just help people buy houses, buy rental investment properties and this and that. I was like, how much did you do making that? I was like, yeah, over 100K. And keep in mind, again, this back in 2007, I was making $85,000 a year, benefits, this and that. But I was working like 25 hours a week, right? Because again, it wasn't really hard what I did. Didn't really take a lot of like brain power, but it was totally unfulfilling. So I was like, oh, I can just like talk to people all day and make 100K a year. I can do that, right? Plus, I've met other realtors. I don't think they're the smartest, right? This is my arrogant mindset. It's like, I can do this. And so I go get my real estate license, quit my job, and go all in on real estate as a realtor. Now, here's the thing. This is one of my very few regrets in life. The book says buy rental properties, get passive income so that you can quit your job once your passive income exceeds your active income. That's what the book says, and it's incredibly wise. But I have a bit of shiny object syndrome. I saw this other guy is making 100K a year, and all he does is just kind of like talks to people. That seems way more interesting than what I'm doing over here at Intel. And I took my eye completely off the ball and wasted, I would say, probably about 9 years of my life doing realtor stuff when that's not what the book said. So one of the very few regrets. So, for everyone who's listening, like if what I'm saying sounds interesting to you, just make sure you always keep your eye on the ball, because shiny object syndrome is a real problem for entrepreneurs.
So I take it you left your job, you resigned, just jumped right into real estate full time?
Yeah, I submitted my 2 weeks notice. Yeah, I got my real estate license. I submitted my 2 weeks notice. It's actually kind of funny. My boss pulled me aside. He's like, hey, why are you leaving? I was like, well, I'm not getting what I need over here. He's like, what would it take for you to stay? Because like we actually see VP potential in you, right? Like you've got some recognition in the company. Like we see like potential VP in the future. I was like, well, for me to give up on my dreams, because at this point that's what it was, I'm going to need like a base salary of like $200K. To which he replied, I wish you the best of luck out there.
At least you had the conversation. You had the opportunity. That's nice. That's nice.
If you own rental units but don't want to pay for expensive software, check out Azebo, the smarter way to manage your rental properties. With Azebo, you can automate rent collection, find quality renters, simplify accounting and tax prep, get a bank account designed for real estate investors, and save on rental property insurance. All of these services are free through Azebo. Join thousands of real estate investors who trust Azebo to manage their rental business in one convenient platform. Sign up today at azebo.com/HRE. That's AZIBO.com/HRE.
Okay, so you got into real estate, and this was 2007.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not the best time.
And you were trying to broker or be real estate agent, broker deals. Why did you say you wasted 9 years of your life?
Yes, because the book says to buy properties. It doesn't say to sell properties. If you're buying properties, you're buying an asset that has appreciation, that has cash flow, you can depreciate on your taxes, and you have a tenant paying down your mortgage, right? There's like 4 reasons why owning real estate is a great wealth builder. Being a realtor doesn't do any of those things.
And when did you buy your first property?
Well, I bought my primary as an engineer in 2006. I bought a property, I want to say like in 2009, but it was only because we were facing foreclosure in our primary home. So we bought another property just in case the loan mod didn't work out. And so that was the other property we bought. And it wasn't until I think like 2013 that we bought another property.
Okay. So it was 2013 like the first rental, or?
Well, turns out the property we bought in 2009 was our first rental because we were able to do a loan mod, keep the property, and so on.
Got it.
But 2013 was our first one. We're like, okay, we're buying this solely as a rental. And we bought some other properties before I quit my job, right? It was just while we were buying properties, I got distracted from the objective, right? The primary focus should have been buying properties, not selling properties.
Got it.
But 2013 was our first one. We're like, okay, we're buying this solely as a rental. And we bought some other properties beforehand, before I quit my job, right? It was just while we were buying properties, I got distracted from the objective, right? The primary focus should have been buying properties, not selling properties.
So how did you work your way through 2008, 2009?
The very, very fortunate thing for me, and it's a complete blessing, I actually got to sell properties for banks, right? Whether it was Bank of America, Chase Bank, Fannie Mae, and so on. I got that opportunity. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The only reason why I got it is because I'm a minority.
I was just about to ask, how did you get that opportunity as a new agent?
A lesson here maybe for some people is if you try to go through the front door is generally pretty securely shut, right? Like I went to Bank of America, Chase Bank, Wells Fargo, and applied on their website to be an REO agent, right? That's what it's called when you list bank properties. And I went to all these ones, right? It's just like you apply for all these different companies for jobs. You get that auto reply, thank you for your application, we got your resume, we'll get back to you, and then that's it. I had to evaluate. It's like, well, the front door is clearly not going to work because every realtor in America is also applying for this. So I saw that there was an REO conference. So there's a conference where all the asset managers and bankers all, kind of hang out, right? And they talk about how they're moving their deals and so on. So I figured out where the conferences were, and I went there, identified the bankers that would be, deciding which realtors to work with, and I took them out for drinks. right? Like, this is the way business is done. It's relationships. So I talk to them. Hey, what are you doing after this? Hey, how about we go grab some drinks later on? And I took the bankers out clubbing, got them drunk, got bottle service. You know, you're spending $1,500 a night whining and dining bankers, but you get back and you got business. So I'm not saying this is like the right way to do things, but I would say this is probably the real world way to do things.
Love that. I think that's good for a lot of accountants to hear too, because in our space, a lot of the great accountants are very technical. You know, they're not very outgoing. Not to say that they can't build great relationships, but that would scare a lot of people, what you just described. So that's good. That's good. All right. So talk to us about what your portfolio looks like today. And I know you've got like a couple different businesses. Let's hit the real estate portfolio first, and then we can talk about the businesses too.
Sure. So I would say my real estate portfolio, just truthfully, it's not very impressive. You know, a lot of the books talk about buying properties, leverage, this and that. So, you know, I've got some scar tissue from 07, 09, and so on. But I saw a lot of realtors go through divorce, right? When money's not good, bad things happen in relationships, right? So I saw a lot of realtors get divorced. A lot of contractors I knew as well got divorced because, you know, business dried up in that time. So I'm not saying this is rational or logical, but definitely impacted myself and my spouse, right? Because we suffered terribly during this time as well, right? Having a steady paying job to extremely unpredictable income. And so all the properties we own, except for the most recent one, we just own it outright. We pay cash for them. So we have multiple properties that we own free and clear. So I want to say we got 3 rental properties that we own free and clear, and then the one we bought recently was the first one we actually financed it. And I wouldn't say it was a good buy. We bought it only because we thought that maybe my mother-in-law would need a place to live. We're like, okay, let's buy this. It's in a good area. You know, if she needs a place to live, she can live there. If she decides she doesn't want to live there, we'll just put a tenant in there. So that's the first one we bought that actually has a mortgage on it. So I would say our portfolio isn't very impressive because even though I have a very high risk tolerance, I got to witness the aftermath and trauma from everyone else that suffered when the market has a 30% correction.
Well, and the interesting thing, and I can kind of talk because I haven't gone through that personally, so I haven't witnessed that. But my theory is I run a CPA firm, so I'm creating wealth. That's my wealth creation vehicle, right?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need real estate to create income or wealth for me. I need it to maintain my wealth, basically just not lose it. And so I guess my question to you is, do you kind of look at it in a similar fashion? Because you're still buying real estate, it sounds like, but you're just very risk reduced.
Yeah, I would say real estate is a great way to store wealth, preserve wealth. So for me, I look at my portfolio really as are the businesses that we run, right? We run multiple businesses. And if you look at like, you know, the guys that do really well on the stock exchange and so on, right? It was like they took a company, they built it up, and they sold it, right? You can create way more wealth in exiting a business or active income in a business in less time, but long-term wealth is definitely real estate.
Yeah. Well, I like that approach. I think that a lot of people in the real estate space would say, you know, you're crazy for not using debt. But I can tell you personally, every year when our bonuses go out to the team and to all the equity holders of the firm, that's the thing that I'm looking at is, okay, what debt am I paying down? And you know, I'm 32 years old, and I think people would also say you're crazy to pay down debt at 32 years old. Let it ride. I want to create wealth, but I also don't want to lose. I'm more on the loss prevention, so wealth preservation, as you said.
Well, and you know, there's something that a concept that I've gotten into recently, right? Like I get, you know, the leverage and so on, and I think there's a lot of wisdom to it. I'm getting to an age now where it's more important to not lose than it is to win, right? As far as the wealth goes. And so leveraging, it works, but if there's we're in interesting times here. If there's a correction, right? We saw it in 2009, right? What was it? It was voluntary foreclosure. People were just intentionally just walking away from their houses, right? Like that's what caused the last crisis was we had people losing their houses, and then after enough people lost their houses, everyone else was like, well, what's the point? keeping my house, right? And that's what really drove prices down. So yeah, you can have a lot of wealth, and as long as the cash flows, that's great. But man, as a realtor during that time, I got to see what real wealth did, right? And real wealth, I'm talking about people coming in with $18 million proof of funds. We had one fund came in, right? It's like, hey, I need a proof of funds. It's like $83 million. Like, okay, like this is what real wealth looks like. They just buy properties cash. They just wait for the waves, right? When market crashes, they buy everything cash. And when the market appreciates, they either sell them or refi out. But real wealth operates in cash.
And so you were selling again for the bank, right? So these guys were coming in and buying blocks of foreclosed homes, I imagine.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, I mean, I guess it's good that you kind of linked up with the bank, and it sounds like it has now all paid off. So what are you doing on the business side?
So we have a few different businesses. The one that I am most passionate about is our sales training business. You know, we get to work with investors across the country on how to have an actual conversation with a homeowner so that you can buy the properties. So that's the biggest one. The other one is we do wholesale in the Phoenix market. And for those that are unfamiliar with wholesaling, basically, we are the people that are sending the direct mail, like We Buy Houses Cash. You see the billboards that We Buy Ugly Houses. That's not us, but comparable. Those ugly bandit signs on the side of the road, you know, that say like We Buy Houses. That's what we do. It's pretty ugly, the kind of marketing that we do, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat that either, but it's also very effective. And so we're the guys that are contracting houses anywhere from 45 to 75% of market value after repairs. And we sell them to flippers or buy and hold guys who will perform on the property prior to close of escrow. So let's just say, for example, I got a property, it's worth $300,000. I go under contractor for $160,000. I sell it to Brandon for $180,000, and then he actually shows up on closing day with the $180,000. Well, that delta between $160 and $180 is revenue to myself for sourcing the property, marketing, paying my staff, and all these other things. That's what wholesaling is. It's just arbitrage. Same thing as like how Best Buy buys Frigidaires from a wholesaler and then sells it on the store floor. We're doing the same thing. We're contracting and selling it to a person that's going to do something with the property.
So in case anybody's interested in kind of exploring your businesses further, what are the names of these businesses that you're running?
So for our wholesale company, it's Onward Financial Solutions. For our education company, it's just Disruptors. Sales Disruptors. And then for our title company, because we also own a title company because we're doing volume, might as well own a title company, right? You might as well sell the fries and Coke with it.
That's smart. It's vertical integration. I love it.
It's vertical integration, right? So for that, that's Magnus East. And then we have multiple joint ventures. We have the Whale Club, which teaches certainty. We have sales leadership, which teaches salespeople, business owners how to manage salespeople, because salespeople managed ineffectively are absolutely insane, right? So we teach people how to manage salespeople. And we have a group here within our organization that services all the media. Is the reason why this looks the way it does, is I've got the best world-class guys to make this all look good. So we have an internal media team that I aspire one day to also offer media services to outside our company.
Good for you. Okay, so just a personal question, just because I'm curious. What made you like get into the sales coaching business? Like what made you realize there was an opportunity there and then jump for it?
What made me realize it was because people kept asking for it, you know, and it sounds totally cliche. Hey, I didn't want to do this, but you know, you guys kept asking for it, so I made it. But that's the truth. That is the honest to goodness truth. I got a chance to speak on stage. There was an event. Gary Vaynerchuk was the headliner. I was one of the small, guys in the lineup, and they're like, hey, we want you to talk. It's like, well, I'm going to talk about what we do when we're running our appointments, right? And I kind of shared it. And I think it was like a 45, 50-minute presentation. And like we had so many people reach out to me. It's like, man, Steve, we used your line and it worked here. Wow, that was really powerful. Hey, I want more of that. And we had all these people asking me to help them. And, I'm a business owner, right? Like if there's something that you want and I can get revenue from it, I'm going to figure out how to get that revenue. And so we launched this, and it's been incredibly powerful. And by the way, again, former engineer, I was an incredibly lousy salesperson, horrific salesperson, right? Because as an engineer, you want all the facts and all the data. The way I would sell is I would give you all the facts and the data. People don't buy that way. So I had to completely unlearn my everything I believed about the way sales should be, right, as an engineer, and actually learn how to sell effectively, which is how to meet prospects where they're at, what they want, and then once we figure out what they want, give them a solution that matches perfectly with what they want. So before I just like give things to you and figure out which one you wanted, now it's like, Brandon, what do you really want? And I'll figure out if I can give that to you or not.
Yeah. Well, I've spent a lot of time in sales at my company as well and trying to train people on sales. And the number one thing that I've learned is when people have any sort of objection, you don't just throw facts and figures at them because it just hardens their objection, right? They're just like, yeah, exactly. That's why I don't like, or the price is too high, or this doesn't make sense for me. You can't convince people to buy your product or your service or whatever it is. They have to convince themselves. So your job is to figure out how to ask questions and then frame your offer in a way that makes them convince themselves. So that's why I was curious about that, because I've been spending some time in that space and just wondering. So circling back on the wholesaling piece, because I want to ask a few questions there. My first one is just a curious one. So over the past few years, I've been on like Bigger Pockets, In and Out and stuff. And I always see people that like roast the bandit signs. They hate the bandit signs. Why is that? Why does everybody hate bandit signs? Like when I'm driving around, I don't like look at the bandit signs and go, I cannot believe this is happening. It's just,
well, because they're ugly as hell. They're eyesores, right? Like there's like code enforcement has to go out, either mark them or pull them out on a regular basis, right? Like they're an eyesore.
And so what happens when they do that? Do they penalize you?
Depends on the city and so on, right? Like, and depends on how much street smarts you got. Like if you get a call from a really angry person on your bandit sign, I wouldn't invite them to an appointment. If they're calling on a bandit side and they're like, you shouldn't have this here, it's like, okay, but when do you want me to come over to your house? Like that's just not the direction we're going to go on that appointment. We're going to cut that appointment or cut that conversation fairly short. But yeah, I totally get why people hate them because they're ugly. But again, it's kind of like if you look at campaign season, right? Like everyone hates negative ads. Everyone hates when you tear down the other person, right? If you survey everybody, like 90+% of people hate negative ads. But there's a reason why there's so many negative ads. It's because they work.
But they work, right? I read that I think it was a Russian media conglomerate or something years ago did a test campaign where they ran like a weekly, it was just for 1 week. They did nothing but positive news and they ended up losing like 2/3 of their readership during that week. Like their views just went way down because nobody was interested.
No, we don't need good news because good news isn't interesting. We need bad news so that we feel good about ourselves.
Right. Right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I can justify why I am better than the bad news that I'm reading about. Wow, interesting. I never thought about it like that.
It's the reason why we watch reality TV. I mean, I don't, but that's the reason why reality TV exists.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Selling Sunset. It's awful. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So, wholesaling is obviously a really big business. Mm-hmm. When should real estate investors work with a wholesaler, or maybe why would a real estate investor work with a wholesaler?
I would only work with a wholesaler if you're able to secure funding that's like cash. So whether it's cash or a home equity line of credit or a self-directed IRA, or you can borrow private money or something along those lines. In those instances where you can perform like cash, I think it makes sense. You can get hard money loans too, but hard money loans are really expensive, right? In many parts of the country, it's 2 points, a loan origination, and 12% interest rate. So we don't generally recommend that unless you're going to be a really, really fast operator, so that you can minimize the interest cost. So if you can perform like a cash buyer, I think in those instances, it does make sense to work with a wholesaler, because for you to buy from a wholesaler, you need to act like cash. You're not going to get a mortgage. You're not going to go to Bank of America and get a 30-day loan. You have to be a cash buyer. And the reason why that is, if you look at all these bandit signs, right, it says we buy houses cash. This is the promise we make to the homeowner, right? They're going to get a cash offer. So if you want to work with a wholesaler, you can't try to get a loan. You've got to behave like a cash buyer. The other thing too is I would say do your homework. Be aware of the pitfalls, right? Like we have a property that we bought with a private loan, from one of the investors that trust us. We trust them, and like we bought it sight unseen because it's another market, and like we got the inspection report after we bought it from the buyer who was buying it. And I like the report's like, we bought that property. Okay. Right. So whoever buys from us is going to do a lot of repairs. I want to say we bought that one for $235 cash, right? And private money loan, but operated like cash. And I want to say like the fair market value is somewhere like in the high 300s. Whoever buys this, and we're closing, I think, in a week or two. They've got like $45,000 to $65,000 worth of remodeling work they're going to have to do, right? So, again, you need to be able to operate like cash. You need to have resources with contractors, someone that can do repairs for you. We're not selling houses that are move-in ready. The people we sell to are the ones that make the houses move-in ready.
Yeah, that's a really good point to bring up, that generally speaking, and I would say it's probably true about wholesalers across the United States in my experience, they're not selling move-in ready houses. They are selling fixer-uppers, but they're also bringing you below market deals and typically off market. Would you agree with that? I mean, definitely off market, but
100%. Yeah, you're walking into a property with equity. Right? When you buy a property from a wholesaler, again, if you can operate like cash, you're walking in with equity that you can unlock, whether with a contractor or with sweat equity.
Yeah. So there's more opportunity for people that are willing to put in the work or figure out the systems that can work for them in rehabbing that property and then getting it rented out. A lot of our clients actually will buy from wholesalers, fix it up, rent it, and then refinance it. Kind of like that BRRRR strategy on
BRRRR model's great.
And that has been great. My partner, who was on, I think, episode 1 of this podcast, his portfolio now is like $30 million or something like that. And he built it all over the past 10 years by doing pretty much exactly that. I mean, he would just find these off-market deals. He'd put in the sweat equity, the labor, the money to get them up to speed, rent them out, and then he'd refinance, go find the next one. He just never stopped doing that refinance model. And because the real estate market just was on a tear over the last 10 years, he made out really, really well. So that's kind of the benefit there. Now my question to you, Steve, is if I'm an investor, how do I find a wholesaler? Do I just like Google? I mean, you got to have your VIP list, right? Like you got to have your guys that are going to close every single time. So how do I finagle my way in to get deals from you?
Well, generally speaking, if you buy a deal once from any wholesaler, all the other good wholesalers will find you. That's one of our objectives, right? So I got to find motivated homeowners that want to sell fast for cash. That's just half of the business, though. The other half of the business is I need to find people that are willing to pay a price that makes sense for me, right? If they can pay 85%, I'm pretty happy, right? Because there's a delta there of 10 to 15% that I can, rely on as revenue. So one side is to source motivated homeowners. The other side is to source cash buyers or buyers that behave like cash. So if you close one deal, then other good wholesalers will find you. The other thing is if you were to go on Google, sell my house fast, right? Now here's the thing I'll ask you, and everyone that's listening. When you do sell my house fast, don't click on that Google ad because it costs me $78 every time you click on that ad. So don't click on that ad, right? What I would ask you is to copy the URL into a separate tab and then opt in and talk to us. Nothing more aggravating than to have someone click on one of our ads and we talk to him. It's like, thank you for costing me. I mean, that's a nice dinner with my family.
Cool. So number one is to potentially Google sell my home fast, and you'll start seeing who's ranking for that in your geographic area.
Who's spending money to source properties off market? Yes.
Okay. And then once you do a deal, you've kind of solidified your spot as somebody serious.
Yeah, you raise your hand. And the other good wholesalers that are running good operations will find you.
And how do they do that?
public records. And so we have a person whose job, he's a salesperson. His job is to find other buyers. So public records or buyer sonar, PropStream, property radar. These are all different tools that we all use to source properties or source buyers.
So if I'm a new investor and this is my first time, or maybe I'm even an experienced investor, but it's my first time working with a wholesaler, how do I know if I'm working with a good one or a bad one? Like, what are some things that I should be looking out for?
That's a fantastic question. Truth be told, we have a hard time telling even within the industry because our industry attracts people that are not rule followers, right? If they're rule followers, they'll probably have like regular jobs and so on. We attract highly independent, less compliant people. And so with that, it's kind of hard to tell who's real and who's not, even in our circles. One thing you can ask for are settlement statements. So one thing we require, so we have Real Estate Disruptors, that's podcasts that we run. For you to come onto our show, you actually need to provide us settlement statements. Again, we verify, right? To prove that you're actually doing deals, because there's no way to tell whether you're doing deals or not. Now, as a realtor, right, because that's the other hat I wear, as a realtor, every time I do a transaction, it's recorded in MLS. And because it's recorded in MLS, it's verified, right? It's validated. But in wholesaling, the only way we can do it, since it's not a regulated industry, is to get copies of their settlement statements.
And wholesalers don't need their real estate license.
Nope. Unless they're in Illinois, Oklahoma, and I think very recently there was another state that was added to that list. I can't remember which state that was.
Do you see more states moving that direction, requiring wholesalers to have license? 'Cause, I mean, they're like effectively doing the same thing as being an agent, right?
They're mostly doing the same thing, yes. I would say I would not be surprised if within the next 3 to 5 years it's regulated in more, where you have to be licensed in more than half the states.
Because the license protects the consumer at the end of the day. I mean, you've got essentially if something goes wrong, you've got somebody that you can sue, right? And I guess it would be much harder to do that with the wholesaler.
I'm not really sure it protects the consumer. I'm of the belief that every time we get regulation in the way, it just kind of screws things up. And this is, again, speaking from anecdotal evidence. You know, like I was around during the short sale times, right? And I remember we had with short sales, we had Dodd-Frank come through, right? And when Dodd-Frank occurred, so many homeowners got screwed because if you just look at the human psychology, right? Like people won't do things to fix their situations until it's almost too late. That's just the way we are as a species, right? And so a lot of people won't talk about their foreclosure or accept the reality of their foreclosure until about like 3 to 4 days before foreclosure date, right? 6 month notice, 3 month notice, all these things, like they're like, I'll figure it out. But reality starts to set in with 2 weeks to go. But what Dodd-Frank did was you were not allowed to start a short sale process unless it was 3 weeks prior to foreclosure, because they don't want people taking advantage of the people going through foreclosure, right? Like that was the law stated that way, right? There were so many homeowners that reached out to us that we just genuinely could not help. It was beyond aggravating because these people needed our help and we couldn't help them.
Interesting. That's a very good perspective. Thank you for sharing that. So if I'm an investor and I'm working with a wholesaler, what are some tips that you could give me as the investor to make our relationship better, more collaborative, more effective? Like how do investors work well or better with wholesalers?
I think the biggest thing for investors working with wholesalers, I think, is being responsive and then performing when you say you're going to perform, right? Like if you say, this is a deal that works for me, don't back out, afterwards. Now, if something substantial changes, right? Like, yeah, I totally get it. But the way we generally work is if someone's committed to buying the property, we're operating as if they're buying the property. And when they back out, the day before, a week before, that puts us in a really bad spot because we made a promise to a homeowner that we were going to close on this date. So for us, fortunately, we have the operations in place where I can source my own capital and perform on that property. But I would believe that I'm in the minority in that regard. Most wholesalers, if the buyer backs out on the deal, they can't just get capital and close on the property. And so What happens then is the wholesaler looks really bad and the homeowner's pissed. And so I would say the biggest thing you can do is if you're going to commit to the property, do whatever due diligence you need to do, right? Like, we're not saying don't do due diligence, but if you say you're going to do it, at that point, you've got to go through with it, because if you don't, you're not going to get another deal from that wholesaler, and that homeowner is the one that pays the price when you back out.
Good tips. What are some common mistakes that you see investors make when they buy properties through wholesalers?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a common mistake, but it's a glaring mistake when I see it happen. And it's believing the wholesaler when they tell you what the house is worth, right? So I say, hey, Brandon, I've got this property. It's worth $300,000. It's $200,000 to you. Are you interested? You better underwrite that deal yourself. Do not rely on a salesperson's perspective. Their job is to maximize revenue. So recognize you're dealing with a person whose goal is to get as much money, revenue from you as possible. And I've got no qualms about it. I'm a capitalist through and through. So, for your side, in working with a wholesaler, it's caveat emptor, right? Buyer beware. Do your research, verify that those numbers make sense. Because if the numbers don't make sense to you, don't jump on it just because you feel like you have to. By the way, urgency is something we're also really good at as well, right? So don't feel like you have to jump on it, because if you don't take it now, I got 5 other buyers lined up. Don't commit to multiple 6-figure decisions on a gut feeling. That's what I would say. Caveat emptor.
Sounds like you've seen that happen a few times.
I have. And those buyers get added to our list.
Well, thanks for sharing all that about wholesalers. I'd like to take this a little bit more macro for a few more questions. Sure. What's something that you wish that you knew 2 to 3 years ago?
I wish I would have gone on TikTok earlier. I know that sounds ridiculous because TikTok's mostly dead now, but it was like a gold mine for a bit, right?
Is it really?
For lead generation, it is.
Huh. So they really dialed it back. Are they trying to make you pay now?
No, just the algorithm's always changing. So there's a period of time where if you jumped on it, you could have really leveraged it, but right now you can't. So I would say, looking back, there's that. I wish that I had exercised a little bit more restraint. We all have this problem where we believe our own BS. And so this idea of the party is going to go on forever. And I knew the party wasn't going to go on forever, but I was absolutely convinced that when the music stopped, that we'd still be totally fine. But man, our Phoenix market adjusted so quickly that when the music stopped in June of last year, we had to make some really, really tough decisions. And I thought, hey, we got 3 months reserves, we're good. Man, those 3 months reserves, they lasted, I want to say, almost a year, right? But they got depleted. So, we had to make some tough decisions in a very short period of time. So I would say, looking back, just I have a tendency to always go fast. I wish I would have just slowed down a little bit and believed a little bit less of my own BS.
Very, very wise words, and sorry to hear that. What do the next 1 to 2 years look like for you? What are you hoping to accomplish or grow?
I would say the biggest thing, so there's 2 things we're working on. We got one that's a flagship product, which is our sales leadership, where we help other business owners outside of real estate, just any industry, but business owners on how to effectively lead and manage their salespeople, because they're managing staff is one thing, managing salespeople is another thing, right? So we've got that. We've been pushing that for, next month, right? July will be a year since we launched that. So I think that could be really big. That can make a big dent. The other thing on the other end of the spectrum is our sales disruptors, which is our sales community, where for $97 a month, people can learn from us on how to be an effective salesperson, right? So we got both ends of the spectrum, right? How to become a better salesperson, how to manage salespeople. So those are the 2 things that I think for the next 1 or 2 years is what I'm most excited about, because my goal, my ambitions is 5-10 years from now, sales will be completely different and revolutionized. Right now the way it works is people are terrified to go to a car dealership because that is the classic image of a salesperson. And I want sales to be done the right way, where it's a consultative approach, having a conversation, figuring out what's important to you, and then figure out whether I can service that or not. And then there's no one that we've seen at scale show how to effectively manage salespeople. All we see is like a lot of people directing and micromanaging salespeople, but not leading them effectively. And I think that's a big opportunity for us as well.
Yeah, I love hearing that. Actually, as you're talking, I'm like, I'm going to go look this up after our call because I need that. That's awesome. All right. Well, I've got 3 closing questions for you. We are coming up on time, so let's get started with this. So, what is your favorite book? It does not have to be a real estate related book or a business book. I think I kind of know. You already mentioned it. But what is your favorite book?
I mean, I would say right now is Rigging the Game. I actually have this little cheat sheet right here in front of me. But I would say Rigging the Game is by a friend of mine, Dan Nicholson, and a mentor as well. And, a lot of people in the entrepreneur world are fast starts, quick starts, hard charging people. And that's great for the most part. Like the world needs that. But because we're hard chargers and fast movers, we don't always exercise restraint, and that's how we get in trouble. So I think if you look back and all the financial mistakes I've made, if I could just get rid of all the financial mistakes I ever made, I'd be incredibly wealthy, right? So what can we do to slow it down, be introspective so that we can reduce our financial mistakes? So Rigging the Game.
Very good. All right. Question number 2. What is more important in real estate investing, cash flow or appreciation?
Oh, cash flow for sure, because appreciation is great for wealth. It's amazing for wealth, right? That's the hack, right? But cash flow is how you sustain. Good market, down market, bad market, whatever, cash flow is great, right? You can sustain almost anything so long as the cash flow positive. I said I have very few regrets. My biggest regret in real estate was when I started in 2007 was I didn't take out any hard money loans because I was seeing these hard money lenders for 18%. And I was like, what idiot would ever get a loan at 18%, right? But there were a lot of properties that were available for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. That if I bought those for 18% interest, I would have cash flowed, right? And those properties now are worth 10 times more. So I wish I bought those at 18% interest rates because I would have cash flowed from day one, and then I would have taken, because of the cash flow, I would have been able to take advantage of the appreciation. But without the cash flow, there's no appreciations. You have more chances of getting blown up before taking advantage of the appreciation.
That's very good. Wise words. Hindsight's always 20/20. All right, question number 3. Last question. What is one last piece of advice that you would love to leave our audience with?
I would say be very clear, be crystal clear on what your objectives are, and then devise a plan to accomplish that objective. So I said earlier, I got shiny object syndrome. I wanted to buy properties, and then I became a realtor and then a wholesaler, right? So many people are like, hey, I want to buy properties, and then they quit their job like I did to source properties. If your goal is to have rental properties, stay at your job and buy rental properties, right? If your goal is to have a real estate business that buys properties, then have a real estate business that buys properties. But be crystal clear on your objectives. Identify what the rules of the game are. What are you willing to sacrifice where you're not upfront, so you're not compromising on your values later on, and then execute. Like, be consistent, be steady, and execute.
Love it. Love it. Steve, if somebody is listening to this and they want to know how to contact you or connect with you or any of your businesses, where should they go?
The best place to find me is on Instagram at steve.trang, steve.trang, or you can find us on disruptors.com or salesdisruptors.com. Those are our 2 different outward-facing websites.
Awesome. Steve, thanks so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so very much for having me. I was honored when you guys reached out. I was like, I don't know if this is going to fit, but I'm really glad that we did this.